Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for September 26th, 2019. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the latest film and TV news. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta. And joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Weekend Editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
And Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
Ben, you're ready. You're getting ready to leave on a trip. Are you ready?
No, not even close. I have so much work to do still today and a lot of prep, packing, and all sorts of stuff to do tonight. So yeah, it's going to be a fun one.
well, before that, let's do the podcast. Let's start with the news story that hit after we recorded the podcast yesterday. Actually, it hit late yesterday night, and that is that Marvel head Kevin Feige is developing a new Star Wars movie. This is kind of shocking because no one expected this news. It was confirmed by Hollywood Reporter, who contacted Disney. We don't really know much about it. They have a quote from the chairman and chief creative officer, Alan Horn, who basically says that they're excited at the prospect of working with Kevin because he's such a big fan of Star Wars. I think one of the reports said that Feige even has some actor he wants to lead this film. But aside from that, we don't know much. I will say that, when Kathleen Kennedy's contract was going to be up a year ago or something, there was a lot of rumors that Kevin Feige was going to take on the role as the head of Lucasfilm. And I even asked him in an interview if that was true, and he said no. And I said, "Are you interested in making Star Wars movies?" He said, "Only in my backyard or something with my toys." So that was him back then being coy. But apparently he does have an interest in making Star Wars films. And I've talked to Kevin Feige on and off the record many times, and he's a huge Star Wars fanatic. Some of the times I've interviewed him, he's had like Han Solo and Carbonite socks on, and he's just like that kind of Star Wars nerd. And Star Wars is actually his first love before he actually found his way into like loving Marvel and becoming that guy that created the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I'm interested to see what he's going to do in this universe now that the Skywalker saga is coming to an end. But Ben, do you have any idea, like, what do you think Feige is going to bring to the Star Wars galaxy?
I'm curious about this because I'm wondering if this is going to be his opportunity to tell a standalone story, like if this is him sort of shrugging off the shackles, the self-imposed shackles that he's put on himself with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and just telling like a singular story, if that's something that he's actually interested in, because he spent the past decade plus linking all of these things together, and that's got to get exhausting after a certain point. And for him to be such a huge fan of Star Wars, and like he said, playing in the backyard with his action figures even as a kid, I wonder if he's cooked up his own like self-contained type of story here, or if this is going to be something else that has larger implications for the rest of the Star Wars universe.
Well, I know he's a big fan of the original trilogy and that era of Star Wars. He's been highly influenced by Star Wars in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Infinity Saga. He's even mentioned a few times like what the influence have been, and even like they did 10 years of Marvel Studios 10th anniversary, and that was highly inspired by the Star Wars first 10 years. He even claimed he stole the name from that. But I do wonder, Lucasfilm, Disney, and Kathleen Kennedy have kind of taken a step back in their approach to Star Wars. They were going to do, a saga film every other year, and every other year a standalone Star Wars story film. And now they've kind of, shut the lid on the Star Wars stories for now. And, they've announced, 2 trilogies that are in the works and an Obi-Wan film. So I guess the standalone stories aren't closed off because there is an Obi-Wan film, but that's kind of a prequel, sequel.
Well, an Obi-Wan series.
Or series, yeah, sorry. Series. It was originally rumored to be a film. But I'm wondering, do you bring someone like Kevin Feige in, even if he's the one that approaches Lucasfilm and Disney about this Star Wars idea? Does he get involved for a standalone film, or do you want to bring someone like Feige in to create a universe of some kind? What do you think, Brad?
I think maybe the best thing for Feige to do, because since Star Wars is already its own connected universe, is to let Feige craft a story around a character that maybe he created and wants to see injected into the Star Wars universe. Because along with this story was word that he already had an actor in mind that he had talked to about starring in this movie if it moves forward, which to me sounds like he already has this character fleshed out and knows what he wants to do with it. So maybe we're looking at, what could essentially be a Marvel franchise, if you will, within the Star Wars universe, where we focus on a single character and follow their journey as opposed to an ensemble of characters.
It'll be interesting to find out what comes of this. And also, there's no real word on how long Kathleen Kennedy signed on to re-extend her contract. Some people have speculated that she just wanted to stay on to end this trilogy. Maybe Feige would be interested in taking on the challenge of Star Wars. I feel like he's accomplished so much with Marvel, and there's almost no more sky above, where he hit with Endgame. I feel like Star Wars is his longtime love, and maybe that is a place that, now especially it's in a more rockier state than it has been in years. Maybe that poses more of a challenge. Do either of you think that he could be eyeing a space to replace Kathleen Kennedy?
That is interesting.
I mean, her contract got extended 3 years, right?
Oh, was it 3 years?
I thought so. Yeah. Isn't that what it was back last fall? I think it was. She got extended for 3 years, so she'll at least be over there until 2021.
The one thing, Peter, about this that that we haven't talked about yet is that Feige being involved in producing a Star Wars movie just goes to show you that Sony's claim that he was too busy to produce another Spider-Man movie is total bullshit. Well,
maybe he was too busy because he was producing a Star Wars movie.
I guess maybe they knew about that already, but I don't know. It just seems like, especially just from a producing standpoint, we don't know the full length of, or the full involvement that he's going to have with this thing. He could just be, guiding it from afar. We don't really know, but he does have a lot on his plate. But it seems like, he's done well enough, better than anybody else. He's done the job of being able to keep a lot of plates spinning. So I feel like if he wanted to make another Spider-Man movie, he could have, and that was just Sony sort of trying to deflect the blame there.
Yeah. I'm whatever it is, I'm really interested to see what the future lies for Kevin Feige and especially the Star Wars project. But let's talk about Marvel's Ghost Rider. This was going to be a TV series that was going to be at Hulu, and now it is dead. Brad, what do we know?
Yes, Ghost Rider is dead. No more walking the earth with a flaming skull. The series was set to go to Hulu. It was supposed to be the next project that kind of continues the story of the character as he was introduced in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. This is the Robbie Reyes version of Ghost Rider, the fifth incarnation of a character who has been essentially cursed with these powers of turning into this demon of sorts, a flaming skull that rides around on a motorcycle. And Gabriel Luna was reprising his role. In case you don't remember who he is, he's playing the new black goopy Terminator in Terminator Dark Fate. But now the series is dead, so he won't be continuing that at all. It sounds like this is due to creative differences between Hulu and Marvel Television with regards to what either of them wanted. Of course, that's something that is said a lot of times when they don't want to be fully honest about what actually happened behind the scenes, so it could be something much more complicated. There's always the chance maybe Marvel Studios decided they wanted to use Ghost Rider elsewhere in the Marvel Cinematic Universe at some point, and the series didn't really seem like something they wanted to do for Hulu.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because a couple days ago there was a rumor reported on some sites. It was something that we didn't write about because we have journalistic integrity, but that Kevin Feige wanted to make a Ghost Rider movie, and 2 days later this is canceled. So maybe there's some kind of truth to that. I don't know.
It's possible. You never know with this kind of thing. There's so many moving parts, and it's hard to say. But I'm not really a fan of Ghost Rider as a character. I really just don't see how he fits well into the Marvel Cinematic Universe at this point. So this isn't really a big loss for me.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't watch him on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Ghost Rider, for me, as a kid, I loved Ghost Rider, I loved Venom, but I think I loved both of those characters just because they looked cool and badass on the page.
Yeah, for sure.
But they weren't really good characters, and they weren't really good stories, so I don't know. I would be hesitant to see him brought into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but they are bringing in Blade, so I mean, you do need to like kind of have that like darker, more adult side of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so maybe that's where he would be used. I don't know. Anyway, speaking of Venom, speaking of the Spider-Verse, a new movie has been announced and is being written. Ben, what do we know?
Yeah, so Sony is making a Madam Web movie that is set in Sony's Spider-Man universe. Now that Spider-Man has been yanked out of the MCU, Sony has, Venom, they have Morbius coming up, and they've actually hired the writers behind Morbius, Matt Sazama and Burke Sharpless, to write the screenplay for a film based on Madam Web, which is sort of a deep-cut character in the Spider-Man mythos. She first appeared back in the comics in 1980. She is usually depicted as an elderly blind woman suffering from a chronic neuromuscular disease that makes it difficult to move and breathe, and as such, she's connected to a life support system that looks like a spider web. The clairvoyant character has precognitive abilities and once helped Spider-Man find a kidnap victim. So that's the sort of rundown of that character. I know Madam Web from the Spider-Man animated series, which we talked about not too long ago on the podcast. She, in that show, was sort of depicted as like this all-seeing interdimensional like chess player, almost like this person who's recruiting heroes for larger purposes throughout the galaxy, and she was able to like whisk Spider-Man away to using the astral plane to alternate dimensions, and she was very like I saw somebody compare her to like the Oracle from the Matrix, and it's kind of like that, but more like the Oracle mixed with the Ancient One or something like that. So I'm totally shocked that Sony is interested in making an entire movie around Madam Web, who seems like a really, frankly, bizarre choice for something that is so early on in their plans to build their own sort of version, and especially for this to be the announcement that comes out right after everybody has such a sour taste in their mouths about Spider-Man leaving the MCU. Like, okay, if you don't want that, here's a Madam Web movie. Like, it's just a really weird move.
Yeah, I was a big reader of like the Ultimate Spider-Man comics in the late 90s, I think. And I don't think I even remember Madam Web. Like, so maybe she didn't appear in those, or maybe she did at one point and I just didn't read that arc. But doesn't Madam Web have a museum of figures of celebrities made entirely of spider webs?
Boo.
That's almost as bad as one of Jacob's jokes.
I think it was pretty good, so you can suck it.
But I will say that like she definitely doesn't seem like an A-list or B-list or even C-list Spider-Verse character to play with. I know that, the Spider-Verse is big. They're doing stuff in the animated world. They're doing, they're making another animated movie. They're making spin-offs. They're making TV shows. There's a lot in the works for the future of Spider-Man and Spider-Verse. But Madam Web just seems like such a low fruit there. I don't know.
And especially for a movie. Like, I would not have been, as surprised if it was like, oh, it's a movie about, I don't know, like Black Cat and Silver Sable, the characters that they were actually developing into a movie at one point, or setting up for a movie at one point, and Madam Web was going to be like a supporting character in that. Like, sure, that makes sense to me, but an entire movie centered on Madam Web, like, how is that going to work? I don't know.
Maybe they think that they can do what DC is doing now and make like villain movies like Joker and shit.
Or, I don't know, I guess, like, the interdimensional aspect of it, like, maybe they're pushing that character so early in their ultimate plan for building out their universe. Maybe they're pushing this character so early because they want to establish the ability to jump between dimensions in the live-action realm, and she would be a good guide to be able to do that. And I don't know, maybe there's some ambitious plan that we're not privy to right now, that we can't see, but they have something in mind. So I hope that that's what's going on here.
I feel like some of these projects get announced so early just so they can see what the fans are going to say about them, to see if they actually care and if they think they should do it. And then when all the fans are like, ugh, gross, they're like, all right, never mind.
Brad, I think you're putting way too much faith in them in that they actually care what the fans think at all.
That's true.
But, okay. But caring what the fans think brings us to our next story, and that is Jurassic World 3. Fans were really not a fan of Jurassic World 2 Fallen Kingdom, and it sounds like for the third film, they're coming full circle and bringing back a lot of the fan favorites from the original trilogy. Brad, what do we know?
That's right. Fans have asked, and they are getting it. Samuel Jackson, Wayne Knight, and whoever the actor is who played Robert Muldoon are all coming back for Jurassic World 3. So get excited, guys.
Wait, didn't Samuel Jackson die?
They all did.
So when my wife and I saw Jurassic Park at the Hollywood Bowl recently, I was talking to her, and I don't think we actually saw Samuel L. Jackson's full body in that movie. We see his arm go over Laura Dern's his severed arm go over Laura Dern's shoulder, but we never see him. So I've always sort of wondered, and I was sort of messing with her and talking about this, like, is he still alive, like running around on that island somewhere? Like maybe he was a tech guy, maybe he could somehow fashion himself like a robotic arm or something. So maybe Sam Jackson could come back.
I would love for them to like go back to the main island again, and like it's all torched now from the volcano, but Samuel Jackson's still living there. He's got like a caveman's Valentine beard and long hair, and he's just surviving. He rides dinosaurs around and shit.
See, I just imagine it being like an after credits scene, kind of like in Solo, a Star Wars story, where like, the reveal of Darth Maul. So it like reveals like a cybernetic arm, and it like pans up, and you're like, Samuel L. Jackson, and he's like, do you guys want to join the Avengers Initiative? And I don't know.
Or he comes up to Owen Grady, and he's like, you're not the only dinosaur trainer around.
Okay.
And by the way, the actor that played Robert Muldoon is Bob Peck, by the way. Apologies to the Peck family for not knowing his name.
I was going to say, the funny thing here is people that are listening to the podcast that don't read the site or keep track of movie news probably think that we've been actually talking about the story of these three people coming back for Jurassic World 3 for the last 5 minutes, but that's not actually the story. Brad was kidding.
The story is the three real fan favorite characters played by Laura Dern, Sam Neill, and Jeff Goldblum in the original Jurassic Park are all coming back for Jurassic World 3. We don't necessarily know the extent of their involvement or how big their role is. Obviously, Jeff Goldblum was in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, but nearly the entirety of his appearance in the movie are two bookend sequences in a courtroom, and they showed almost all of that footage in the trailers leading up to it to entice people to go see the movie, thinking that Ian Malcolm, was back for a full Jurassic World movie. And so it's hard to say what their roles will be in this, movie now, especially now that dinosaurs are everywhere. Are they helping people hunt down the dinosaurs to recapture them to take them somewhere else? Will they just encounter them on their own? Have they maybe, formed some kind of dinosaur sanctuary where they're taking care of them themselves? It's hard to say with what happened at the end of Fallen Kingdom, but fans are definitely excited to bring them back, but it's also kind of, I don't know, bittersweet, because it kind of just goes to show you that no one really cares about any of the new characters that have been introduced in Jurassic World so far, after they have to bring all three of these people back.
Well, I don't think that these guys are going to be back in a leading capacity. I think that we're going to get a little bit more than what Jeff Goldblum did in the last film, is what I would predict.
I think Trevorrow said they'll be back in substantial roles.
Yeah.
I think is what he said, but I guess that could mean anything.
Yeah, I think it'll be substantial, but I still don't think they're going to be the lead characters. And I can't imagine, Jeff Goldblum kind of predicted that we were opening Pandora's box, and by the end of that movie, he was right. I can't imagine. I'm wondering what his stance on it is. Like, can you put the monster back in the box? Can you kill these dinosaurs? I feel like I don't imagine Laura Dern or Sam Neill's characters being on the side of, like, let's go out and hunt the dinosaurs.
Well, I don't think they would be hunting them necessarily, but maybe like tracking them down so they can get them to a safer place instead of just not like going to kill them.
Wrangling.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to another story that broke yesterday that was kind of interesting, and that is they are remaking Clue, and Jason Bateman is directing and has an interesting person starring. Ben, what do we know?
Yeah, so actually last year we learned that Ryan Reynolds was interested in doing a remake of Clue, which is the adaptation of the murder mystery board game. And now we know that Jason Bateman is in talks to direct this thing. So Bateman actually just won an Emmy this past Sunday night for his work directing an episode of season 2 of Ozark. And now he seems to have found his next directing gig in the Clue remake. And he actually, according to a report from Deadline, is planning to star in the movie as well. But it's still early, in that process. He's not 100% sure if he's actually going to be in the movie. We know that Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick, who wrote Zombieland and Deadpool, were initially hired to write the screenplay for this new Clue, but it's unclear if they're still on board because the Deadline report says that Bateman is going to be developing the script with Reynolds, and I'm not sure if that means that they're actually just going to be taking over and trying to take a crack at writing the script together. Bateman doesn't have any official writing credits, but Ryan Reynolds co-wrote Deadpool 2 last year. So, the old change-up buddies are back. As Brad pointed out, the Bateman and Reynolds co-starred in the 2011 comedy The Change-Up, which, Brad, did you ever see that movie?
I did, and it's fine. It's amusing to have Ryan Reynolds and Jason Bateman doing a body swap comedy, but neither of them really has any, significant traits that you can do as an actor to really, really like get into the role in the same way that like Travolta and Cage did in such a bombastic way in Face Off. Mm-hmm. So it's more so just about, the comedy of just them trying to live each other's lives.
Gotcha.
Let's talk about Clue for a minute, because I think, I'm a big fan of board games, and Clue, the original film adaptation, I think is probably the only good board game adaptation in cinema at this point. Not that there is a whole lot, but, Hollywood has been trying. Ben, are you a big fan of Clue? Because I know you love like kind of the murder mysteries, and there's a lot of fun there.
Yeah, I love Clue. I love the board game and the 1985 movie that stars Tim Curry, and it has such a perfect cast. I love that movie so much, and so any talk of a remake, I'm automatically a little sort of leery about, but the original is still going to be there. So I just hope that they're able to come up with something that is, as clever as what they did with the first movie, and maybe they can fill it out with a cast of today's great comedy performers and maybe be able to come close to capturing the magic, or maybe a different type of magic as what that 85 film produced.
And I know you and me are the only two people on staff that has watched Ozark, which Jason Bateman directed. I liked it, I think, a little bit more than you, but I still, was let down by last season. But I do think Bateman has talent, and I do think he's good with comedic actors, and I do see this does seem like it would be good for him. I'm wondering what your thoughts are after, abandoning Ozark season 2.
Yeah, I gave up about halfway through, but I have seen a couple of the episodes that he directed, and he seemed, very sure of himself, and he fit into that world very well. And as an actor, he's been in a ton of really great comedies and has certainly, witnessed a lot of. I would like to think that, being in the industry as long as he was a child actor at the beginning, that he's absorbed enough of how to, create a great comedy that maybe he's going to be a decent choice here. I think when we were talking about this yesterday, Brad pointed out Game Night, and it's going to be tough to top that movie, which he starred in, what was that, last year? But maybe, I don't know, maybe the Game Night could be an interesting sort of framework for how to approach this movie.
Brad, what do you think of this team in a Clue remake?
It remains to be seen. Obviously, Jason Bateman has some skills as a director. At least the Television Academy thought so, since they just gave him an Emmy for directing an episode of Ozark last weekend. Him and Ryan Reynolds are at the very least very funny actors and funny together. So I'm hopeful. Like Ben said, I think it's going to be hard to top Game Night. And a big part of what made Game Night great was the writing and directing duo behind that, Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daley. So hopefully, Reynolds and Bateman working on this together, they can come up with something that is at least, hopefully, as entertaining as the original Clue. But again, that's also a pretty high bar.
By the way, the original Clue, which I didn't see in the theater, but if you've seen it on DVD or home video or on TV, it had like a bunch of different endings. And if you saw it in the theater, you got one of the random endings. On home video, you get all the endings. Like, it kind of rewinds and shows you like the different possibilities. I'm wondering if this is going to be a remake and not just an adaptation of the board game, do you think they'll try to incorporate that in any way? I mean, now with technology, you could probably make a choice on a remote if this was like on home video, kind of like Bandersnatch and that kind of thing. Or do you think like they'll just not even think about that?
I feel like that's such a key element to the way that first movie worked. Even though I think, it didn't really do that great in theaters and really became more of a cult hit later, probably when most people could see all of those endings back to back to back. But it's so, that concept is so tied to that movie. I would not be surprised if they actually did like a modern version of that, where they literally put out, different versions of the film in different theaters across the country and did the exact same thing with this movie.
Okay, let's move on to our final story for today. And they had the Triple Force Friday reveals today. Brad, what did we learn today? Yeah,
so they didn't reveal all of the stuff that's coming on Triple Force Friday, which is next week on October 4th. Some stores will be opening at midnight to release the first merchandise from Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, The Mandalorian, and Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which is a new video game from EA coming out in November. And while the toys themselves were cool, they showed off some of the Funko Pops and Black Series figures, as well as some animated figures from Galaxy of Adventures animated shorts that you can see on YouTube, as well as an interactive droid of the new wheel droid Dio.
By the way, I need that. That interactive, like, you can remote control it with like a phone or an iPad, and it looks like amazing. And
it's pretty cool.
And it seems like they're not using Sphero anymore. Like the first two movies, Sphero made like the BB-8s and R2s, and this is made by Hasbro.
Yeah, I imagine they probably wanted something that was maybe a little less expensive, since Sphero products were rather pricey.
Yeah.
But the toys look cool, and there was some additional information about the movies that came from the toy releases, just some little tidbits. Now, keep in mind, toys aren't always indicative of details that will be in the movie in an accurate sense. There's been plenty of times that toys tied to a movie franchise don't really have anything to do with the plot or what really happens. Star Wars stuff is usually pretty accurate, since it comes directly from Lucasfilm, and there's not a huge expansive history to pull from to make, alternate and variant figures of different characters, like there is with Marvel Comics. So one of the things that we saw was a new Y-Wing Lego set that comes with minifigures of Zori Bliss, which is Kerry Russell's new helmeted character, as well as Poe Dameron and Dio. So it would seem that Zori Bliss maybe gets in behind the cockpit of a Y-Wing. She was the minifigure that was situated in there. That's not necessarily indicative that she'll end up flying it, but because she does have a history with Poe Dameron, as we've learned, there's a good chance that she might end up fighting for the Resistance before the end of Rise of Skywalker. And there was also this teal astromech droid that was included that I don't believe we've seen before. So that's pretty cool. And the Y-Wing has a pretty cool paint job too, that does make it seem like it could belong to Zori. So maybe it's just a ship that she has, regardless of whether or not she fights for the Resistance or not.
Yeah.
And then there's a new Lego Millennium Falcon set. They've done way too many of these by now. And so this one reverts back to the round satellite dish after the Falcon in Force Awakens had a more rectangular one. But since that got lost, they had to replace it. And that Lego set revealed another new character, an alien character named Boolio, Boolio. And there's been images that have leaked of this character online. He has kind of a lizard-like face, but with two big yellow horns on either side of the front part of his forehead, and two smaller horns that come out of his chin. He's kind of got like a pear-shaped body in this in like a dirty pilot suit. So he comes with the Falcon. So that doesn't necessarily mean he is, involved with anything happening on the Millennium Falcon, because sometimes they just include extra minifigures with that set because it's such a big one. But there's also a chance that maybe he's part of Lando Calrissian's crew or something like that, because we don't know what Lando has been up to this whole time since Return of the Jedi. So maybe he's got some new cohorts that are hanging out with him.
Yeah, we also saw like some kind of like droid maker or something.
Yeah, so there's a new C-3PO Black Series figure, and they show that the accessories he comes with include Chewbacca's bowcaster and his bandolier, which is that big strap that he always wears across his body. And we had seen promotional images that had leaked of him holding that stuff, and we're not necessarily sure why he's holding on to all of Chewbacca's gear. But the other accessory he comes with is a very tiny little alien character guy named Babu Frick, who was only described as just a droid builder. We don't know anything more than that beyond that, but compared to the C-3PO figure, he's a very tiny guy, like maybe the size of like half of his shin or something like that. And if I had to guess, I'm willing to bet it has something to do with the shot that we see with C-3PO having red eyes in the trailer. Maybe it's something that needs to be fixed on 3PO. Maybe there's something in 3PO that he tries to access or something. But I imagine that's where that character comes into play.
Yeah. Is there anything else?
One little tidbit came for The Mandalorian. They had Pedro Pascal and Gina Carano on hand to check out their Funko Pops and action figures for The Mandalorian. And we got to learn a little bit of detail about Gina Carano's character, Cara Dune. She's a former Rebel shock trooper, and to kind of signify that, it looks like she has a beauty mark style tattoo on her left cheek that on first inspection would just look like a little mole, but it's actually a small black tattoo of the Rebel Alliance symbol.
That's interesting.
It is.
For Force Friday, are you planning on going to the stores to buy anything?
I will probably go at midnight to whatever store is opening closest and first. I have the benefit, actually, of where I live in Indiana. I live a half an hour away from the Eastern time zone border. So if I drive a half an hour east, I can be an hour ahead. So I can go to stores over there and get stuff. And then if I don't find something that I want, I can make it back on Central Time before the stuff goes on sale and see if I can get it there.
Wait a second, Brad. Did you just say that for Force Friday you're time traveling to get what you need?
Exactly.
That is incredible. Okay.
But yeah, so I will likely just get some of the Black Series figures from. I do want the Mandalorian ones, and I'll probably try to get my hands on some of the Rise of Skywalker ones. If they didn't release all of them, so I'm not sure if I ever really want all of them, but there'll probably be a couple that I want.
Yeah, I'm curious what else is going to be out there. I'm going to probably check out Force Friday, although I think the only time I ever checked it out was the first, the one for The Force Awakens, and the Funko Pops were decimated, as our former writer Jermaine Lucier once wrote. So everything was gone by the time I got there. So I'm kind of curious if it's going to be the same case. Have they? Are they going to be more stocked in LA? I know you're in the middle, you're in a better part of the country to get, have access to stuff. But I'm curious to check it out. Anyways, Ben, I'm assuming you're skipping out. Well, you're going to be in Hawaii, right?
I am, yes.
Yeah. So you're not going to be celebrating Force Friday in Hawaii.
No, I am not. Unless you call Force Friday sitting around on a beach and drinking a lot.
Okay, well, you enjoy your vacation, and this does it for today's edition of Slash Film Daily. You can find more of all of our work at slashfilm.com. You can find links to all the stories we talked about on today's podcast in the show notes. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please send us your feedback, questions, comments, concerns, peter@slashfilm.com, and please rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you tomorrow.